Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners agenda setting work session. It is Tuesday, August 16th, 2022. It is 9:06 a.m. This is set to go until noon today. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, Room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. I'm joined by Vice Chair Ty Menser in the boardroom. Commissioner Gary Edwards joining us via Zoom, but he will be here in the boardroom shortly. We have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. And we have other guests joining us here today, as well as in Zoom. We have Treasurer Jeff Gadman, and I do not see any other elected. So, okay, with that, we'll start on our first topic, which is homeless strategies. And Keely Marino.
Good morning, Commissioners. Keely Marino with Public Health and Social Services. I don't have much of a different update than I gave you last week. We continue to work with all of our partners at the state around the Department of Transportation right-of-way initiative. We are still focusing all of our planning efforts on Pacific Avenue, and we'll be in the near future refocusing our attention on the downtown interchange. Along those interchanges downtown. That will be in the next month or so. I did get word that along with the private, the camp that's on private property behind the bottling company being swept on the first week of September, we got notification that the Department of Enterprise Services and the City of Lacey will be sweeping another camp in September on Desmond Drive. So that's 9 households. I don't know how many people in total that equates to, but that is 3 camps now being swept all at the same time. And I will keep you abreast of any updates on that, but we are obviously concerned about them all happening at once with little to offer in terms of resources for sheltering or housing. We did release our request for proposals yesterday for a new permanent hen provider for a rapid rehousing agent, and then also a new permanent rental assistance program through House Bill 1277 funds. We hope to have a decision and a recommendation for the board in September on that. And that is all I have for you.
Thank you, Keely. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
There you
There you
go. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Do you have any questions for Keely?
No, I do not.
No questions. Commissioner Menser, questions? No? Okay, so no questions, Keely, you're good.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the review of the Board of County Commissioners draft agenda for our meeting of August 16th, 2022. So we'll call the meeting to order at 2 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Commissioner Edwards. Will be an approval of the Tuesday, August 16th, 2022 agenda and approval of the board meeting minutes from August 2nd, 2022. There will be one presentation today, and it's introduction of Emergency Management Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Miller Todd is out of the office. He just happens to get married this week, so congratulations to Ben.
Congratulations to Ben.
And in fact, he's going to be, I can't remember what mountain he's climbing with his soon-to-be wife. So they're going to be, I think, summiting this mountain. Can't remember which one, I'm sorry. And they're going to get married on top of the mountain. Yeah, so fabulous. So good for him. But Kurt Harding will be on his stead this afternoon, and he will introduce the new emergency services manager. That will be Peter Tissoni, and that will give the board the opportunity to welcome Peter to county government.
Great. Questions, comments? Commissioner Edwards? Commissioner Menser?
My honeymoon was at Zion National Park hiking, and I get grief for that sometimes. So I'm going to remember that Ben summited the mountain with his wife. Next time my wife wants to bring that subject. Thank you, Ben.
A little reaffirmation in a few years, right? Yeah.
I think that's a recipe for successful marriage, so good choice.
There you go.
Next is an opportunity for the public to address the board and county manager's update.
This afternoon on your agenda is for you to consider the formation of the Patterson Lake LMD. So you might be receiving public testimony related to that item. Other than that, I don't have any other feedback for you, and I don't have any specific county managers' updates that I'll follow.
Great. Okay, so consent items, we have quite a couple from these past couple weeks, so it's consent items A through L. The first two items, 3A and 3B, are the approval of the voucher list, one for the week of July 11th, the other for the week of July 18th.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item is for the week, as you stated, July 11, 2022, for a total amount of $2,083,671.25. The next item, 3B, is for July 18th, 2022, with a combined amount of $2,131,460.18. And the reason you have those two items on your consent agenda is because we do not have any expenditures related to the atrium.
Thank you. Any questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Menzer? Okay, moving on to item 3C, and we're gonna go ahead and do 3C through 3J, which are appointments to both the Agritourism Advisory Board and new appointments to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, just since those items will be your consent agenda, it will not give you the opportunity to state the names of those individuals you're considering appointments to those boards, so I will walk you through briefly. So the first item is for you to consider reappointing Mr. Nathan Allen to the Agritourism Advisory Committee for 1 year with an end date of August 16, 2023. The next item is for you to consider appointing Mr. Smith Jackson to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council for a 3-year term, with the term expiring August 16, 2025. The next item is for you to consider appointing Ms. Evelyn Clark to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council for a 3-year term, with an expiration date of August 16, 2025. The following item is for you to consider appointing Ms. Juliet Lawson Hall to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council for a 3-year term, and with the expiration date of August 16, 2025. Also, the next item is for you to consider appointing Mr. Kioki Kaunoe to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council for a 3-year term, with the same expiration date of August 16, 2025. Next is for consideration of appointing Mr. Jason Clark to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council for a 3-year term with the expiration date of August 16, 2025. Next is Ms. Marion Wakefield to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council for a 3-year term with the same expiration date of August 16, 2025. Last but not least is for you to consider appointing Ms. Tavisha Gainey to the Racial Equity and Inclusion Council for a 3-year term with the term expiration date again of August 16, 2025. I believe this is a long process for you to consider those appointments, and I'm particularly excited to stand this council and start working with the council as to how we can continue and advance DEA strategies here in the county and in the community.
Questions? Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Commissioner Menzer? Okay, moving on to item 3K, which is contract with Rainier School District for a school resource officer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your consideration. Is a renewal of a contract the Sheriff's Office has with the City of Rainier to provide school resources to the Rainier School District. In this case, is for the renewal for the upcoming school year 2022-2023. This particular contract has a dollar amount of $40,000, and that will be solely compensated by the City of Rainier. Under Sheriff Brady is here. You reviewed this item on a couple of occasions, and he's here to answer any additional questions.
Under Sheriff Brady, anything you'd like to add, sir?
No, I just want to say this is a great commitment that we have with the City of Rainier and the Rainier School District, and we look forward to continuing our partnerships and keeping the kids safe out there in the Rainier School District.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Menzer? Okay, none for me either. Thank you, sir. Next is item 3L, authorize the sale of tax title property via private negotiation to Casabella Properties LLC.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You reviewed this item on a couple of occasions, and as a little bit of a background for to the benefit of the public, maybe 3 years ago, the Board County Commissioner entrusted the Treasurer's Office to be strategic and diligent as to how to surplus tax title property. Tax title property is those properties they have faulted on taxes and other means, and the county holds in custody for the benefit of the residents of Thurston County. And County Treasurer Jeff Gatterman is here, and I'd like to applaud you, at least from my point of view, as to how you have been very diligent in surplusing those properties, and so that way brings those properties into the tax title and benefits not just the county, but also the residents of the county. This particular property for your consideration is located on the Lake Sinclair area, and is 0.32 acres. And the expected direct sale can be, I think is negotiated to be $2,364.50. I know that last week, in a couple of weeks, they had a conversation related to access to this property or access to the nearby property, and I believe Treasurer Gatman answered those questions correctly. But here he is, and to answer any additional questions the board may have.
Yeah.
Treasurer Jeff Gatman, anything you would like to add, sir?
Just thank you for your time. This is kind of a strange property in how it was created. It was never actually a right-of-way, but it's kind of drawn like a right-of-way. The person who wants to buy this property owns the north 30 feet of this strip and is now wanting to buy the south 30 feet of this strip. And the minimum that we could accept in a sale of this is the taxes that were owed in 2016 when it went to sale, which is $300, but this particular party is actually willing to cover all of the collection costs and fees that were part of that package too. So the sale price covers what would have been the minimum bid in 2016. We're pretty excited about that.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Menzer? No questions for me either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, that will end our consent items. Are commissioners okay with all the items currently listed? Is there a wish to remove any of the items?
No.
No? Okay. Moving on to department items. First item from the Commissioner's Office, item 4A, Thurston County logo policy.
Yeah, item 4A, also in item 4B, you reviewed those proposed policies on your July 19th agenda setting. Megan Porter, PIO supervisor, presented those items to you. Through the conversation, you asked staff to submit an AIS for you to consider approving those policies. One is the 4A, which is related to the Thurston County logo policy. And item 4B is related to the Thurston County policy on social media. And Megan is here, as well as Robin, to answer any questions.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Menzer? Okay. Item 4B, Thurston County social media policy.
Yeah, I just covered that,
So
so.
you covered both of them together. Okay. Community planning and economic development, item 5A, set a public hearing on development code docket on item 8.8, habitat conservation plan implementation ordinances.
Yeah, this is the next step in the slow journey of the habitat conservation plan. So you may recall the habitat conservation plan was approved by the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife back in July, and also give us the incidental take permit. That was pivotal as to how we need to move forward in addressing the endangered species, including the HCP, the pocket gopher, and other species. At that point, we stated to the board the next steps in the process for you to consider amending the current Thurston County Code, as well as implementing new ordinances that aligns to the habitat conservation plan. Those particular items before you the Planning Commission has reviewed in several work sessions, one on January 19th, February 2nd, and 16th, as well as March 2nd. And the subsequent meeting in April 20, 2022, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend the Board of County Commissioners to implement and adopt those proposals, county code, as well as the applicable resolutions and ordinances. So this particular item is for you to consider setting the public hearing for October 4, 2022 at 3:30 in the afternoon. So where you'll be receiving public testimony before you can consider adopting those ordinances. You heard last week, there's a little bit of unusual to have this long span for you to set the public hearing and have it on April 4th. But as the director of CPED, Josh Cummins, stated, it gives this more time for the public to go through the review and this documentations that will be available online. And Commissioner Erb was asked the question whether a paper copy will be available. Certainly, it will be available upon request, and that is stated on the legal notice for the public hearing. So with that, Chris Chapeau is here to answer any questions or additional perspective. Chris?
I have nothing to add. That was a great overview. We're excited to move this piece of legislation forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, questions?
No questions, a lot of hard work over a long period of time, thank you.
Commissioner Munster, questions? Okay, no questions for me. Moving on to emergency services, item 6A, FEMA Public Assistance Grant Agreement D20 2005 FEMA funding for January 2020 flood response.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. As you may recall, FEMA is the federal agency that provides assistance during emergencies. And the assistance that we get from FEMA is on a reimbursable basis. We cannot ask ahead of time for FEMA to help us mitigate any type of emergencies. So in order for FEMA to provide funding, it has to be a presidential declaration of an emergency, and that had occurred on this particular item. And this is related to the January 2020 flooding events that we received, that we experienced on the Nisqually area, Nisqually Basin. So here we are, and here's an opportunity for us for reimbursement for those expenses that we incurred as a result of responding to the Nisqually flooding. And this particular item is the instrument. That means the agreement with FEMA in order for us to submit the appropriate documentation and get reimbursement. Unfortunately, Kurt and Ben are out of the office this morning, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. If I can't, I will make sure that those questions are answered this afternoon.
Great. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No, we've had a lot of discussion on this.
Commissioner Munster? Okay. Public Defense, item 7A, interlocal agreement, third amendment for City of Tumwater and Gent Defense Legal Services.
This is an item for a renewal of an agreement with the City of Tumwater, where the Office of Public Defense provides indigent defense misdemeanor legal services to the City of Tumwater. Under this agreement, the City of Stormwater shall pay Thurston County Public Defense a total amount of $479,356 that may include the City of Stormwater for actual cost of the public defense personnel assigned to specific cases, misdemeanor cases. The City of Stormwater will refer to this office, and also will cover outside counsel on those terms. This particular performance for this contract is from January 1st, 2023, and will go through December 31st, 2024. This has been a long coordination with the City of Tumwater, and we meet just about every year to make sure that we provide those services and we meet the expectations of the City of Tumwater. That meeting occurred early in the year, and this is the result of that meeting. I'm here to attest to the fact the City of Tumwater is very grateful the county provides those services to the city, which is, is a lot less expensive for them to secure their own legal services to provide indigent defense.
Great, Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Commissioner Menzer?
No, because of last week's cancellation, many of these items are being on a third review. This one got canceled from a previous, so we're on a fourth or fifth review of that item.
Yeah, because that item, when I presented to you, was not ready. There
Right.
was a little bit issues with items within the contract, so you're right, this is the fourth time we have reviewed this item.
Still good.
Moving on to Public Health and Social Services, item 8A, 2022, additional consolidated homeless grant housing contracts.
Early in the year, back in February 2022, we issued a consolidated request for proposals that included to issue contracts with the funding source of consolidated homeless grants, also known as a CHG, House Bill 2163 and 2060, and the federal home funds. The result of that process, in coordination with the Regional Housing Council, the board approved issuing the contracts back in June 2022. Fast forward to the next month, in July 2022, the county was notified by the Department of Commerce there's additional consolidated homeless grants available for the county to distribute. We had a conversation internally with the staff, as opposed to going through a new request for proposals. County staff work and proposing to look at the current contracts the board approved back in June 2022, and if see if we can those the value of those contracts. That particular approach was presented to the Regional Housing Council, and the Regional Housing Council on July 13, 2022 reviewed the proposal and provided a recommendation to the board to allocate additional funding. The contracts, under this particular item will be to increase the Family Support Center of South Sound, CHG target preservation, additional $58,000 to the community, Catholic Community Services for the Drexel House Shelter, an additional $40,000. Panza, Quixote Community Village for $35,000, and the partners Angels fiscal to continue the Scatter Site program for $207,588. And the performance of this contract will end on June 30, 2023. Tom Webster is here to answer the questions or additional perspective.
Tom?
Good morning. I don't have anything to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer? Okay. Moving on to Public Works, item 9A, interlocal agreement for sewer collection and treatment service with the Department of Corrections.
This is related to the property also known as the Maple Lane School located in the Rochester area. Back in 1999, we entered into an agreement with the then owner of this property, that was the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, the SHS. And that interlocal agreement addresses how we're going to be managing, providing the services and the payments of sewer collection and disposal. So that agreement lapsed in 2019. Since the execution of that local agreement, the ownership changed from the ESHS to the Department of Corrections. So this particular agreement will put us in the position to revisit, reallocate the ownership of the state agency, as well as give us the opportunity to update all the sewer fees associated with this services that we provide to this property. Joe provided additional perspective and he's here to answer any questions. Joe?
Okay.
Thank you, County Manager. I don't have any additional perspective, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer? No. Okay. Moving on to item 9B, adopt resolution of findings and determinations for proposed Patterson Lake management, district number 23.
Similar to the previous item you reviewed on the consent agenda, this is a contract for you to consider to provide the Sheriff's Office to provide the school resource officers to the Nisqually Middle School.
Hold on, wait a minute, I think you skipped.
Skip something.
She announced Patterson Lake.
Patterson
Yeah,
Lake.
sorry, my
We're talking about
apologies.
school
Yeah,
resources.
I was just eager to finish. the Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, item 9B is related for you to consider approving the resolution of finance for in the terminations of establishment of the Patterson Lake Management District. The board held a public hearing on July 26, 2022, and you received significant testimony related to the support of the formation of the Lake Management District. This is the next step in the process. As staff has provided the information in the past, there is a lengthy process that we need to go through. I know that there was a delay in bringing those matters before you to take an action because some of the residents of the Patterson Lake LMD, soon to be, wanted to have that implemented prior to the end of this year. And unfortunately, logistically, that will not be possible. And considering the delays this particular petition has incurred, the board had a conversation that perhaps you will be assessing during your budget process this fall to see if you can loan the revenues that could be generated on this LMD for 2023 so they can start implementing the program without having to be held back by the property assessments. That is really the next step in the process. There is more conversation that we need to have. Elections that needs to occur, and eventually the board needs to hold a public hearing where you'll be eventually assessing the fees for this particular LMD. Tim?
Good morning, Commissioners. Tim Wilson, Water Resources Manager with Public Works. I would just add that the resolution for consideration by the board would do three things. It would excuse me. It would adopt the oh my goodness. It would say that you are finding that the proposed LMD is in the public interest. It would say that you are finding that the proposed LMD is financially feasible, and it would authorize a vote of the public. So to Ramiro's point, passing of the resolution would authorize a vote.
Thank you, Tim. Questions,
No
Commissioner?
questions, thank you.
Commissioner Messer?
I think I do have questions. So one of the things that held up the forward movement of the petition was wanting to make sure that the Patterson Lake group had good understanding of the roles and responsibilities versus the county versus their group. And I spoke with them in a private conversation about that. And then I guess I'm just a little concerned because now we've got our draft sort of document on that, and the Lawrence and Long folks were here objecting to it, and they actually said in that presentation that they talked to Patterson and Patterson was with them. So that gave me a little bit of concern because maybe we don't have an understanding that I thought we did, which was, I was very explicit about that I was willing to move this forward if we had a clear understanding. But if we don't have a clear understanding, then maybe it's what merits further conversation. I just don't know where we're at on that. Maybe it was being misrepresented that they were part of that dissent or objection to the proposed administrative rules. But if not, then I think that's a concern.
Yeah, so I also met with the Patterson Lake group because, and this was before the LMD presentation, and that was also one of my questions was, you know, in regards to the roles and responsibilities and the administrative rules, and they said that they reviewed all of that information with Tim and that they were in agreement with it. And so that's why I was, you know, comfortable in moving that process forward, just because of the conversation we had or I had with that group. So I was surprised to hear that as well, Commissioner Munster. Because, you know, that understanding that, you know, when we had that conversation is that they had reviewed it with Tim and they were in support of it and they were on board with it, so. County Manager?
Maybe an update as related to the briefing you had with the Lake Management District. They provided a proposal, that was on August 3rd, while I was out of the office. Provided a proposal on the administrative rules. So I will be meeting with the staff this week, and to be respectful of their proposal, we're going to take some elements and incorporate into the administrative rules. And at some point, we'll bring those for your consideration. So we're going to review the proposal, how we can incorporate some of the comments into the administrative rules. And at that point, I will bring that to the board for consideration and further action. So that's what I'm working related to the LMD briefing you received.
Yeah, and I have reviewed the draft, which I didn't have at the time of the presentation on August 3rd, and I went through it, and I see areas where there might be a chance to make adjustments to try to make everybody's feel comfortable. So I'm supportive of what you're proposing, County Manager. And I don't want to hold up Patterson Lake again based on representations of other people that aren't Patterson Lake. I'm going to hold Patterson Lake to their word that they gave to me when they looked me in the eye. So I'm probably going to be okay with this, but I just wanted to bring up that point because it was, as Commissioner Mejia said, a little bit, it did catch my attention that they were roped in to that conversation we had, and it sounded like the assurances that we had gotten that they were okay with the draft maybe had changed. And I just wanted to know if my seatmates heard anything on that score, just so I could be fully informed when I cast my vote. Sounds like no.
No, I have not from that previous conversation that I had with them. So. Tim, how about you?
Well, I would just add that staff has the same concerns as what I'm hearing from the commissioners. I would just back up and say that again, we had a virtual open house in May where we very carefully went through the administrative rules line by line with the community. As well as some frequently asked questions about LMDs and other options for the communities if the LMDs were not a best fit. The feedback that we received from the communities following those meetings were that they were on board. Staff is being very deliberate in drafting these resolutions and engaging the prosecuting attorney to make sure that the reference to the admin rules and reference to the budget that the communities are putting forward do not need any support of the county moving forward, so that is the clear understanding in all of these documents. We're trying to be very deliberate in our approach to that. So that is what I would add.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
I guess as a follow-up on that, it seems to me that the county manager's got a handle on how to maybe rectify some of the concerns that'll be coming in front of us at a later date.
Moving on to item 10 from the Sheriff's Office, contract for a full-time school resource officer in the Squally Middle School and the 7 elementary schools in the North Thurston School District during the 2022 through 2023, 2023 through 2024, and 2024 through 2025 school years.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a renewal of the existing contract the Sheriff's Office has with the North Thurston School District. And in this particular case, this is for a 3-year period, the next 3 school years, at $95,000 every year. I briefly mentioned last week that I'm particularly thrilled to see this item, to have a more 3-year commitment, because when the board created this particular position to provide the services, it included a budget proviso, that the budget proviso stated that it will be predicated, this position, on the funding for the North Thurston School District. So that gives a 3-year window to continue to provide the great services the Sheriff's Office provide, in this case to the Nisqually Middle School. And just one point, I think somebody asked me this morning the question, why the same item is one in the consent agenda and the other one's a department item. And we put somewhat of a dollar amount. When it's less than 50,000 is a consent agenda, more than 50,000 requires a little more conversation with the board. That's the difference between those two items. One consent and the other one is department. And Under Sheriff Brady is here to answer the question. And Sheriff, yeah.
Questions?
Great.
Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer?
Asked him last week.
Okay. With that, that would conclude our agenda. We would go on to our standing items. Moving on to our agenda for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. And this is an evening meeting. It's going to be our first evening meeting since I've been on the board. Does that time work for the commissioners or that day? The 6 p.m. meeting.
I'm good with it. It doesn't matter to me, whatever time you set.
This is based on the resolution that were passed 2-1, establishing the Board of County Commissioners meetings. And one item in there stated the board may have a 6 o'clock meeting on the 4th Tuesday of every month. As you may recall, that conversation was part of your decision-making process. And I'm just trying to be diligent to make sure that I follow the intended legislative request on the ordinance. So this is the first meeting, 6 o'clock next Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. We'll see how that goes, and the board will probably have to weigh in on future meetings as well.
I'm good with having it whenever. I don't have a concern about the time. I am looking forward to seeing what the participation is by the community.
Yeah, me too. I'm willing to try this, and if it's really well received, then we can do that. If it's not, we can maybe do it every other month or quarterly, if that seems to fit better. But we got to start somewhere, so why not next week?
Yeah, and the language of the ordinance gives the flexibility of the board.
We'll be competing with Tumwater Council in the city of Olympia, correct? Is that the time? I was looking at Megan. I'm wondering if she knew.
Perhaps, I'm not quite sure on that.
Oh, okay. I know Lacey has theirs on Thursday, I think. City of Olympia has theirs on Tuesday, and so does Tumwater. Okay? So with that, we will call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Vice Chair Menzer. Approval of the Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022 agenda, and approval of the board meeting minutes for August 16th, 2022. There will be an opportunity for the public to address the board and county manager's update.
I have nothing of the sort.
Okay.
I have nothing.
With that, we'll move on to consent items A through D. Item 3A is a request to cancel outstanding warrants.
Commissioners, this item was on your consent agenda this afternoon. We reviewed this item last week. And Robin suggested for us to explore, whether we need to report this to the Department of Revenue. I did have the opportunity to ask that question and have a conversation with financial services. So let me read you the response. And the response is, once our list of uncash warrants are approved for cancellation by the Board of County Commissioners. Financial Services will void those warrants and send the information to the Department of Revenue. We keep the money per RCW 36.22.10, and if you are required to, and we are required to report this information to the states. Folks who have those canceled warrants could still come forward and request the money and it's still owing to them. And at that point, the county, if we get those requests, will reissue those warrants for those who are coming forward. And so that's the process that we have to address Robin's questions last week. To revisit the item, this is total warrants totaling $13,000. $14.87. Those are mainly related to checks that were issued to jury, as individuals in jury duty for mileage. Those are 35 warrants that amounts to $981. Also, there are 5 warrants related to Superior Court vendor activities. Those 5 warrants added to $315.19. We have a warrant for a particular individual, which is for $55. 1 warrant for to Puget Sound Energy for $660.34. And then we'll have 2 warrants totaling $10,900, and this related to a particular executor on a well. That totals of 45 total warrants, totaling again $13,014.87. And any questions?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer?
How would a warrant to PSC not be resolvable?
They have not cashed that check.
I don't know I don't know why someone hasn't reached out to them. The payment is from the Veterans Fund, so I think that's
So they
very
have not cashed
odd.
that. I mean, there was services rendered, we issued the warrants and they have not cashed it. And as you may recall, those are warrants, they have been issued prior to June 1st, 2021. Those are not current warrants.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3B, Human Resources Commissioners, a resolution adopting revised county manager classification specification.
Items 3B and 3C are related. If I may, let me start with item 3C, is for you to consider revising the classification for the assistant county manager. And the assistant county manager needed to have a revision. As you may recall, the sitting assistant county manager has, and the job classification has a lot of budgetary related items. We have gone through the process to take those out since we already have a budget manager, and makes a little more broad in perspective in the requirements. And that will probably give me the ability to start recruiting for the second assistant county manager. The result of that revision put us in the position to also revise the county manager job classification, just to align between those 2 job classifications. Absent any questions, concerns related to these 2 items?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
I guess my questions would be, what changes are being made? You know, I haven't seen anything on it yet.
I can
so-
give you copies of the 2
Okay.
classifications.
I think it's worth having.
Yeah, I'll give you copies of the 2 classifications, and since this item is for your review consideration next week, if you have any comments, certainly, I will share those with you.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer?
What is the, you went fast there, what is the change to the county manager classification?
The county manager classification.
I mean, just at the high, just
is-
restating what you said.
Because since we realigned the job classifications of the assistant county manager to take some of the budgetary requirements, since
I got that part.
So that classification needed to somewhat mirror also the county manager classification. Because the county manager classification, it was a little bit absent of addressing some of the activities. But I think it will be best for you to review those classifications to make sense. I can probably bring it up and walk you through.
And is the assistant, we can look at it, but is the assistant county manager classification then gonna be the same for both the
Yes.
first and second?
Yeah,
It'll
yeah.
be broad enough to cover?
That was important, just to have an equal playing field between the two assistant county managers. Because we couldn't have two different assistant county managers. And I think the trigger point of going through this revision was we were very successful to have Nicole Martinez as the budget manager. So we can start taking the functions of the budget development process out of the assistant county manager classification.
And then remind me, I know we've gone through it, but it's been a while. Remind me what the second assistant county managers, the differentiation between that versus a first assistant county manager, like what is the high level, like division of duties there?
So
Like operations and or what?
the classification remains the same for both assistant county managers. The functions, allocated functions will be a little bit different. So I'm still working, so the umbrella and the context that Robin has right now will not change. That will remain her purview because she has a lot on her plate. So the new assistant county manager will help me on the operations related to the departments. And they still have to define what that org chart is. I have an idea, but at some point that org chart will present that to the board before we get to the point of hiring a new assistant county manager. But I'll provide the copies for you to review that.
Commissioner Edwards?
My initial concerns are that our current financial person, Robin, knows and has a history of all the legal requirements, I guess, of the job. And I'm not sure, I hate to see that passed on to somebody else that maybe doesn't have the same background in so quickly, I guess. That's my initial concern.
The budget.
On all, yeah, we have to post certain things, certain times, all that. I don't think that's something you learn out of the book immediately, you know, that's all. So I don't know what, I'm not saying I don't like it, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I wanna make sure we get it right when we make those reassignments and that the person is ready to go. And kind of coming from another state, I'm a little bit worried that the connection isn't there. So I don't
She's
know
on a,
if that's up to you to.
she's on a steep learning curve.
Yeah, I bet
She's
she
taking
is.
it super fast,
Okay.
but I'm not going anywhere, I'll be here.
Oh, okay,
And she reports to me, so.
So the job classification, if the board consider approving this new revised job classification, Robin is not going to walk away from that responsibility of the budget. And in fact, ultimately, she will be responsible because she oversees the budget development process. That's really the gist. It's just an opportunity to clearly define, because if absent revising the assistant county manager will give me a difficult time to recruit for the second assistant county manager under that job classification, because it will be another budget manager in a way.
So I think it's a smart thing, in most places I've worked, you've got a job classification that's broad, and then each position has its own position description. So that's kind of what we're moving toward. My position description won't change much, it's still got a heavy emphasis on finance and budget and oversight of administrative type things in the county. And the position description for the second assistant county manager is what Romero's still working on.
But I'll give you copies for you to review. Thank you.
I'm not, it's kind of hard to get me to let go of the budgets.
Okay, item 3D, which is public health, a resolution increasing the full-time.
This item is not ready yet, so I have some questions on this. So
Oh,
I will bring the item for the following.
Okay, so it will still be on the agenda for August 23rd?
No, for the following.
Oh, for the following, okay, so scratch off item D.
So this will not be on there.
Okay. Moving on to department items. Items 4A from the auditor's office, approval of the voucher list.
Yeah, this particular item is on your department list, and this is for you to consider approving the voucher list for the week of July 25th, 2022 for a combined amount of $5,583,401.65. There is an expenditures on the atrium on page 69 for a total amount of $4,252.12. Any questions?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Not at this time, thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Mensah?
No.
Okay. Moving on to community planning and economic development, item 5A, set a public hearing on development code docket item A27, non-conforming code update, critical areas ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff provided you with a briefing on August 3rd, where they provided some feedback on the non-conforming code update, which includes this item. And considers amendments to chapters, Thurston County Chapter 24.03 and 24.50 of the Thurston County Code, which proposes to amend, this amendment will expand the administrative review and approval of the small-scale projects associated with existing non-conforming uses, structures, and lots, and which has a minimal impact to the critical areas. You reviewed this item also on August 9th, where we provided perspective. Also, the Planning Commission has reviewed those items and has provided a recommendation of 5-3 vote for the board to consider approving those amendments. You provided guidance on August 9th to go ahead and bring an item for you to consider setting a public hearing. In this case is for September 20th, 2022 at 3:30 in the afternoon. Chris Chapeau is here to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chris? Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, it seems like we just set a hearing for the HCP, I think, for October. I'm just wondering how come, I don't know, this is getting ahead of that or something. I'm just trying to figure out the why
So
on the time frame.
this is not related to the HCP.
No, I know it's not, but which one is more important? And that's kind of what I'm
So if it's more important,
questioning.
obviously it's in my humble perspective, the HCP legislative process.
Right, but because we're not going to be able to implement the HCP until 23, is that why it's not quite
The
so
reason
important?
as to why the board may consider setting the public hearing for the HCP related legislative actions for October 4th is to allow the public to have more time to review.
Okay. Okay, good enough.
That's the reason. No other reason than that.
I'm good.
Commissioner Mensah, questions?
No questions. I just wanted to say sometimes we set these up for decision and I'm probably gonna have some questions, whether or not there's a lot of public comment. I wanted to move this process forward, so I'm good with the public hearing, but I would ask that we not set this up for decision at that same day.
Fair enough. So we'll have only one action for you to consider to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
And Chris, if we can set up a follow-up briefing after the public hearing, that would be great.
And just as a FYI, I think it had to, because I'm not here that day. So if there was any kind of debate or questions, then you would only have to commissioners.
Okay.
So let me check if September 1, 2, 3.
I'm out that whole week of the 19th.
No, I was looking if September 20th was the fourth Tuesday of the month, so it will be at 6 is the third, so we're good on the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Chris. With that, we'll move on to item 6A from Public Works, request for proposal for a comprehensive stormwater study for the storm and surface water utility.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This proposal is for you to consider authorizing the department to issue a request for proposal to secure the services of a consultant to conduct a comprehensive study of the storm and surface water utility and associated regulatory drivers, and also to implement industry-based management practices, which also it will help the county to establish goals, objectives, and determine best way to provide a high level of services to our citizens associated with this particular utility. If the board approves on this particular item, the department will come back to you for you to consider awarding the contract to a selected outfit firm. And and we don't have Shannon.
We have Nate.
We have Nate.
Yeah, Nate Emsley here, Senior Water Resource Engineer. I'm covering this item for Shannon Peterson. Thank you.
Any questions, any additional perspective?
No additional perspective. Again, we briefed the board on this item on July 27th, so we're just hoping to proceed with this project here. Any questions?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, I do have a question. Could you articulate the problem better as to why we're going to spend some money? We're missing the boat. We need to do this because of a requirement from ecology. I don't, what's going on that hasn't been handled properly? I don't know. I'm curious the why.
Yeah, Tim Wilson is on the line, and Tim, feel free to jump in if you would prefer, but essentially, Commissioner Edwards, we may have blind spots with the stormwater utility right now. And so to summarize what we want this study to accomplish is to provide us with a gap analysis. We do feel like we do a good job of hitting those industry best practices. But again, a selected consultant might be aware of other agencies that are doing better at hitting those industry best practices. To answer your question of whether there is some kind of a regulatory driver for completing the study, such as our municipal stormwater permit, that answer is no. Really, we just want to make sure that our stormwater utility and all the services it provides are right-sized based on desired levels of service. Tim, anything you would want to add to that?
No, I think that's really good, Nate. I would add the two major drivers for the stormwater utility, which is a fairly large utility, is our municipal permit that's issued through ecology that changes and evolves periodically every 6 years with additional regulatory requirements and programs within that. And then the resolution that formed the stormwater utility from within. So best management practice for a utility that size is to periodically do this this high-level review, as Nate mentioned, a gap analysis that kind of reconciles the regulatory requirements versus the resources that we are currently utilizing, and to tell us if we are heavy in areas or lacking in areas. And then what we intend to get out of this as well is kind of that that list of, for the board to consider, here are the minimum things that we would need within the utility to satisfy our regulatory requirements. And here are possibly some other ideas for the board to consider to potentially expand the use of the stormwater utility.
Thank you for that.
How many dollars are we talking about? Just potentially expending on something like this, and how many dollars are being overseen by this utility? Just roughly.
So in our request for proposal, the anticipated dollar amount is $350,000 to $425,000, Commissioner Edwards. And Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but the utility kind of annual budget amounts to in excess of $8 million, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know much about the utility that you're referring to be honest with you. It's just, I oftentimes wonder if the expenditures we contemplate couldn't be handled in some other way. And so, without me knowing a lot about your activities, that's hard for me to come up with a solution to that. But the industry must have peer groups or something, I don't know if it's professional organizations or what, that you would stay in touch with. And Kitsap County, you know, at a meeting, you might say, well, we're doing this or that. Oh yeah, this is really working. This is a new thing. And I don't know, I find it hard to believe that we need to spend that kind of money to tell us we're doing good or not. So I'm a little gun shy on that. That's all. That seems like an awful lot of money. I don't know the number of FTEs and everything. We couldn't take one of our own very competent individuals in the field and have them do a review. I don't know. I mean, I've been involved in organizations that got certifications in different things, and oftentimes that was done through an assignment to an individual within that particular organization. And we're paying them anyway, and they kind of know, you know, the whole thing. So this looks to me like too much, but I can be convinced. I just want to hear a little more about it, I guess. Yes, sir. I see the county manager.
Go ahead, sir.
So, good questions. Let me offer you a perspective in terms of the investment. You talk about 350 to 450. This study, I think, will give us the perspective as to how we can improve the level of service for the next, at least for the next 10 years. And across from the operations point of view as well as the capital point of view of the utility itself. So if we look in terms of the investment, and you heard that perhaps the annual budget is $8 million on a 10-year period, it's just about $80 million. A $350,000 to $450,000 investment, I think is well worth it, because this is not a yearly investment that you will see. This is an initial investment that will help us to be more effective on the next perhaps 10 years. Just additional perspective to that.
I guess I'm just trying to think back on bugaboos that have arisen from this stormwater utility. And I don't know that the expenditure being proposed would fix that. I mean, the ditch district is saying they want X number of dollars or something to solve a problem. Well, how come we have that problem? And is this going to address that? Will it address the concerns of those individuals that are being flooded? And maybe they're being flooded because the development of a development, I guess, from a municipality. And is that why? Is that the kind of thing we're gonna get back? That yeah, you guys are in the wrong, or no, you're not in the wrong, you're in the right. And we're gonna fix this ditch district complaint. I don't know, I'm just struggling with this.
So to relate to
It's a lot of money.
the ditch district, no. This study will not be addressing. I believe we have addressed the ditch district concerns via 2 letters. And they have already filed all public records, which we just go through that process. What this study will do is look at the whole county under this particular utility comprehensively as to how we can move forward in implementing some new strategies, both operationally as well as capital. They will be inclusive of the areas of the ditch district, but it not be exclusively targeting the ditch district. That will not be part of this.
You know, we continually hear about damage to our water because of runoff. I don't know that much about that, but is this going to give us a better handle on how we handle runoff and who should be overseeing this? I don't know. I mean, we had a fairground thing. We had something that happened there having to do with runoff. Are we gonna fix some things? I haven't heard any direct correlation between, well, this was a problem. If we would have had this study, you know, it would have fixed it. So I'm just concerned about expenditures that, well, sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not sure about it at this point. I don't know is there a rush? It doesn't sound like there's a regulatory rush. So is it worth having more discussion on it rather than a commissioner that doesn't know very much about it just saying, well, I'm not ready yet, you know.
Don't sell yourself short, Commissioner.
Well, I like to think I'm up on some things, but I'm not up on this exactly for that type of a financial expenditure. And are we doing $8 million a year? I didn't think we were doing $8 million a year, but anyway.
Can I ask, what is I mean, Nate or somebody said it's periodic, high-level review. So have we done this? When's the last time we did it?
That's a good question. When was the last time you conducted a similar study?
So this would be the first time the county has ever done this particular study.
When was this briefing?
July 27th.
July 27th, so I can go back and look at my notes from that date.
Yeah, I'll back Commissioner Edwards up in one sense that I feel like we've gone over this and I feel like I was pretty well convinced about it, but it doesn't sound as convincing today for some reason. Maybe we're just all in. And I'm trying to remember what all we went through that related to it. I'm sure it's in my notes. July what? Was that?
27th, and it was at 2:30. No, just kidding.
That's why I have this little tablet, so I can.
Well,
it was at 9 a.m. on July 27th.
Yeah, there we go.
I'll be about, if Nate gave us a just real, 2-minute refresher. What did you cover during that period that was gonna eventually lead to this proposal?
Just to make sure I heard you correctly, you're asking for a 60 to 120 second review of what I covered on that briefing.
That's right. That's what I'm asking for.
So, yeah.
I
So
think
I guess
all
I'll
of
just,
us are maybe a little shy of memory. We get a lot of briefings, cover a lot of topics. And on this particular issue, I don't remember that this dollar amount was ever referred to, that we were gonna take X number of dollars and spend it and fix what problem. It's not fitting for me.
Okay.
I don't know.
so I'll take a swing at recapping that briefing very quickly here. So again, as we've mentioned, we're hoping that this study would be a high-level gap analysis on what the utility accomplishes. So a number of different things that we accomplish here with the utility as it relates to flooding and water quality. We have obviously our capital improvement program. We have operation and maintenance efforts. But there's some things that county staff can only help with so much. An example of that might be education and outreach. And so this study hopes to, assess all these different functions of the stormwater utility and again, stack that up against what a consultant might recommend for industry best practices. Now, as various people in this conversation have alluded to, that the bare minimum that the stormwater utility can be doing as far as functions go would be the bare minimum to meet the requirements of the ecology issued municipal stormwater permit. Now, as part of this effort, we would hope that the consultant works with the county to develop what I would like to call a menu of options of various levels of service. I would anticipate that that minimum level of service would be that to hit the municipal stormwater permit requirements. From there, the county staff and the board would choose to scale up those levels of service based off of our strategic objectives and the service that we would like to provide to the community. That's my 60-second synopsis of that briefing.
Okay, what's the dollar amount in that? Not what we're planning on spending, but how much is in that protected budget?
The ending fund balance?
And the ending fund balance of that particular protected budget, just roughly, what's in there? Because I don't recall $8 million being spent every year on this stuff.
No, that was not the expenditure, it was the revenue.
There's about 8 million coming in. I mean, I'm wondering about that camping club out there that we're continually having water quality issues in that one creek that flows into the salt water. I can't think of the name of the club right now. But it's been an ongoing bugaboo for the county for the last 20 years that I'm aware of. Failing septic systems and poor water quality. And if we've got money, I'd like to be looking at fixing something like that.
And I would say that when the stormwater utility recognizes that there are water quality issues, we do make progressive steps to do our part in helping with that. For example, Woodard Creek flows into Woodard Bay in North County, and there were historical studies that identified water quality issues within Woodard Creek. And what that ended up resulting in is we have a handful of capital projects that seek to improve water quality from county right away.
So you had asked about the fund. Fund number 4060, which is the Storm and Surface Water Fund, is projected to have an ending fund balance this year of just over $7.6 million. They have expenditure authority of $8.1 million and revenues anticipated to be $7.2 million.
And that is just the capital or the operation?
That is the M&O fund, the reserve. Let's see, the reserve has my computer is slow this morning.
So that day we had the Patterson Lake, then after that we had the swab, and then we also had another corridor study, I believe. So we had a lot of things packed that day. I was looking at my notes for the things we did.
I looked at my notes, I didn't write anything down
But
about
I
this
didn't
study.
write anything on this, so I was like, I was obviously in agreement for it because I have notes for the Patterson Lake, for the Martin Way corridor study, for the Western Washington Phase 2, and the SWAB annual briefing, but I don't have notes for this. So I was like, obviously I was catching on to the presentation, to what, I was being told, so.
Yeah, I don't remember a controversy at all on
Yeah,
this
that's.
issue. But the expenditure, I don't know, these studies, we spend a lot of money on this kind of stuff. And boy, that's a pretty good chunk of money. What is that, 4 FTEs or something that are, wages and benefits and stuff? And why don't some of our own people, and I know we've got some good people that oversee this. And
If I can chime in on that real quick, just Commissioner Edwards, to your point about kind of that internal review. There are several staff that interact with other utilities, other stormwater utilities, be it Kitsap County, Pierce County, the local cities regarding our program. So there are a lot of communications and feedback that we give and receive regarding the utility on that. And to your question, which are really good questions about, can the stormwater utility assist with this and can it assist with that? That is one of the many questions we are hoping to achieve by having this study done, is how much leeway do we have within the regulatory requirements of the stormwater utility. So we are hoping to answer those questions as well. Again, it's a best management practice for the utility, and to Ramiro's point, it is a longer term study. If you look at Kitsap, or you look at Pierce, or City of Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, they all have comprehensive stormwater plans, and it is a little bit unique that Thurston County hasn't done this in the past, and we see it as a blind spot as a whole. I think that going forward, the hopes of the study as well is to help the board decide whether the community is getting good value for the stormwater rates that they pay each year. So while we feel it is very, very important and will answer a lot of questions for us and be a good discussion point for the board moving forward, it is certainly up to the board to decide, but we feel it is very important for the utility.
Okay, I'm gonna end this line of questioning just on the fact that I think we've got some pretty qualified people that are working within this organization. Personally, I think some of them are more expert than maybe many others. So I guess I'm gonna go ahead with this because it never hurts to ask about an RFP and what you might get out of it. But this comes back, something crazy. I'm gonna be needing to be convinced that we don't have people internally that are very capable of doing this, instead of hiring 4 FTEs from some firm somewhere that has no allegiance to Thurston County. They just have an allegiance to the dollar. And I'm not against that. I'm just thinking we've got some pretty good people that maybe could put something together like this and that do have that expertise. So anyway, more to come, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the cost, that's like 3 or 4 professional people working full-time for 1 year.
Yeah, that's what
and that seems like a lot. And you mentioned other cities have comprehensive stormwater plans, we don't. So are we gonna get a product? You didn't mention that up front, that we're gonna get some sort of like written product besides, I mean, obviously there's a report whenever you have a consultant study, but is it something that's more substantial than that we can point to, that besides paying for, engineers or whoever the experts are that do this kind of work, we're gonna have something tangible that will help us in the future? I don't know, it seems like a lot of, I have to say, it does seem like a lot of money just for kind of, let's just see if we're doing things right. I mean, I guess it begs the question for me, how different are the approaches of Washington jurisdictions to stormwater? If everyone's kind of doing stuff the same way, this doesn't seem like a good expenditure. If it looks like, oh wow, we're just doing things totally different, then maybe we do need to sort of do a comprehensive review of why we're doing things different and are there gaps in the way we're doing things. But I don't know, commissioners I don't think have that backstory. How different would it look if we were sitting as commissioners in Kitsap or Whatcom or Yakima County in terms of the way they run a stormwater utility? Or is this just the way things are done are the way things are done? Then it seems like a big expenditure.
To answer your question, Commissioner, about the deliverable, yes, there would be a product with recommendations to the county that would come from this effort. Stormwater utilities and how they operate, there is some variability from one jurisdiction to another. So this would, answer some of the questions that we have about how we can sync up the stormwater utility with some of these other water quality type questions, and what we can utilize the funds for, and how we can coordinate with other programs. It gives that look into the utility from an objective source. And, I think it would go a long way in having that review of the utility that we could then communicate out to our ratepayers that specifically we are not making these decisions internally. We have had an objective professional organization that does these and is familiar with utilities, look across our many lines of services within the utility, and based on that, they're providing these recommendations. So we do see value in having that objective outside of the county look at it.
I will say, connecting Tim's answer to Commissioner Edwards' question about a problem, the ditch districts did represent to me that we didn't have a set of coordinated projects. We weren't expending money. We were building up a fund balance. So to be able to say, no, these are the priorities that our consultant recommended, and we're going down the list of the top priorities, and that would be useful. And that would have been useful to me in that situation to say to those folks, who thought that we weren't coordinated in our approach, and we were missing the fact that, their project wasn't included or whatever. I mean, I could see that value in terms of a way to talk to disgruntled ratepayers.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess maybe to follow up on that, because my concern, not only the dollar amount that seems excessive, but why don't we take a chunk of that, 400,000 or whatever, and hire someone with the proper background and have them go to the proper training sessions, certification sessions, whatever it is, and put something together. Because I don't know, I just don't see what 4 people are gonna do for a year to give us a project. I just don't see it.
There's no 4 people. They will be.
Well, it's equivalent to 4 FTEs.
It is and let me go back, and I totally agree with you that we have absolutely capable professionals in the county.
I think we do.
And no doubt in my mind. But as you have seen in other areas, when we have consultants bring it in, it's because a set of skills that those well-qualified county employees don't have. And in this particular study will be a comprehensive look at the utility, reaching out to the citizens and said, get the feedback as to how you like this utility to move forward into the future. And get the board to establish some goals and objectives within that process as well. Because traditionally this utility has been addressing stormwater, and I think over the last couple of 3-4 years, they have shifted to do a little more water quality, as you heard. Is that the right approach as this utility? And I think it's time, at least from my humble perspective, to invest this, to have an assessment. Are we doing the right thing, or there's opportunities within the utility we can do better to serve the citizens? So I know there's a lot of money, but sometimes I believe is investing into the future may be something the board may consider.
I need to go look back at that briefing. That's gonna be my homework for next week, because again, I remember there were a lot of questions asked, but I don't, so I just.
So we like to keep this item for next week, or like more time to review it?
Commissioners?
I don't have any problem about moving this issue ahead, because this isn't an expenditure yet. We're just asking for a few bids on, and I suppose those bids are gonna include what the finished product the bidder is willing to give us at the end of this. And that's fine. I'm a little gun shy on the dollar amount and the benefit in turn that we would receive. Because I do know you've got some good folks that work there. And I kind of hesitate to name the few maybe that I know, picking those folks out and giving them special preference. But I think you've got some expertise there that if we sent them to a couple of, I don't know, national conferences, I guess, or what, with adequate training, we might be able to, you know, get by with spending $50,000 and end up with a better product. I don't know. I'm hesitant. I'm just cautious, that's all.
If I can just add real quick, it's very similar to our water system plans as well that we do for our water and sewer utilities, which are, you know, it's that objective look from the outside. And I guess I would just add and commit Nate here, if a follow-up briefing or a repeat of the briefing, which in my recollection took actually about 15 minutes and was really well supported at the time prior to moving forward, I think we would be happy to repeat that briefing.
I'll be interested to see if that dollar amount was mentioned when we had that briefing. Because usually things like that pique my interest at some point, so. Okay, so anyway, there's more to come, sounds like.
Are you comfortable with moving forward for next week?
I'm good with Commissioner Edwards' approach.
Okay, so we'll see this item next week as well.
Thank you.
Okay, that will conclude our agenda for our meeting of August 23rd. Let's go ahead and do our next three items and then we'll take a break. So with that, proclamations and awards and advisory boards and commissions, I'll pass this to our clerk of the board, Jamie Caldwell.
Good morning, Jamie Caldwell, clerk of the board. I have no updates relating to the proclamations. For boards and commissions, I've included the appointment applications for David Petrich and Rebecca Sanchez to the Historic Commission. I've touched base with the staff contact and verified that they're being recommended for appointment. I have one application for a non-farmer position with the Agricultural Advisory Committee. I forwarded it to the committee staff contact so it can be reviewed at their next meeting and a recommendation provided to the board. I'm hoping to have that back for your review next week. Outside of any questions, that's all I have.
Could we get the application for the non-farmer position?
Yeah, I can get that distributed for you.
And then questions, Commissioner Edwards,
No.
Commissioner Menzer.
No. Recommendations.
Yeah. My question is for the legal professional representative. Did we reach out to the County Bar Association?
I have not yet. I will go ahead and do that right now.
Wasn't there one for the Historic Commission that needed a legal representative for this one?
Has a functioning
Right. Yeah. I know that one was really funky and how the appointments were. Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Next, our PIO check-in.
Before we go on boards and commission, Madam Chair, I put a copy of the handbook in your box. If you have the opportunity to review, let me know if you have any feedback related to the document. And also, we will be sending, as requested by the board, to the chairs and the committees to have a review of the very big period.
It's already been sent out because I sit on SWAC and I got it, and I received an email from another committee where they were sending it out as well. So thank you for that, Jamie.
Pero si have perspective or comments on that document, please let me know.
Okay. So with that, it is 10:35. Let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break. Oh, no, just kidding. Sorry. I thought Megan had given her. Go ahead, Megan.
Good morning, Commissioners. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor. I have no updates for you this morning.
Okay. Now we'll go ahead and take a 15-minute break.
Sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair.
Okay, and we are back from break. It is 10:55 a.m. and we left off with briefing and public hearing decisions pending, county's 2022 through 2023 general liability insurance policy. And this was a follow-up from our briefing on August 10th.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tammy Devlin, I think she's with us this morning, gave a presentation to the board related to the insurance rates. Without getting too much into the details, there is a significant increase to the insurance rates associated with the risk pool. I believe Tammy followed up with additional information via email to all of you. So this morning, I will ask for the board to provide a direction on those rates. There is a couple of items the board may consider. One is whether you would like to maintain the $250,000 premium, or you like to go up to $500,000 premium. That's one decision. And the other decision will be if you like to purchase an additional $5 million in excess of the $20 million. In the past, that will cost us $69,329. That is expected to go up a little bit more. And staff's recommendation is for you to consider purchasing an additional $5 million in excess of the limit that we have coverage, which is $20 million. I agree with the recommendations that Tani presented to you. Continue with, go with the $250,000 premium, and also to purchase an additional $5 million in excess of the maximum.
I thought the recommendation was to purchase that if it could be gotten for $100,000.
Yeah, thank you. If that doesn't go more than $100,000.
I agree with that one. So, I'm good.
So is everyone in agreement with that one? Thumbs up? Okay.
I do have a question. Did my seatmates get to see the presentation by Wasick about why?
Tammy forwarded that email to all the commissioners, so I cannot see,
Yeah.
I cannot attest if.
No.
No.
Didn't we have a presentation by the Wasick folks about?
It was on Friday, a presentation. Did you have a chance to attend?
I did not, but I just wonder if anybody else did. It was the justification about why.
Nicole Martinez attended that session. She said it was excellent. She told me that they had explained all the moving parts and how they did the rates. It is recorded. I was doing other things on Friday, so I'm gonna go back and watch the recording, but she said it did help to explain all of
The whys, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I just thought it was gonna be worth watching. I wasn't able to.
she said it was worthwhile.
Just a little more clarification on what Tammy went over with us.
So I see it's a 3-0 to move forward with the staff's recommendation of the proposal.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we also have
Thank you, Tammy.
approval to increase the internal service rate for next year. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. Moving on to our next item, which is commissioner items. We have a total of 4 items. And then we'll move on to other commissioner items. The first one is Community Transition Facilities, Supreme Living.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. As you may recall, you received significant public testimony related to a Supreme Living. There's an outfit that is planning to use residents in the Tenino area to provide a transition housing for those individuals involved in the justice system. There's 2 parallel tracks on this. The Supreme Living we're in the process of following with the permitting process. There's a compliance issue that we're working with them. But also at the same time, the board requested to have a perspective as to what the program the state has And so I asked Leah Landon, which is present today, to give us a perspective in terms of what is the program the state is implementing. And again, this is not necessarily related to the specific of Supreme Living. This is more about the program the state has. It has those transitional housing, what it calls the less restrictive type of alternatives. With that in mind, Leah, your show.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good morning, commissioners. For the record, my name is Leah Landon, and I'm the Thurston County Criminal Justice Regional Program Manager. As Ramiro said, I'm here to share some information with you regarding the proposed tenants of that facility in Tenino. For context, the proposed facility will be run by Supreme Living, which is a company that specializes in residential services for those who are behaviorally challenged. And it is a contracted housing provider, and the contract is to be held by the Department of Social and Health Services, also known as DSHS, and the Special Commitment Center, or the SCC. The proposed residents are those who have been granted a conditional release to a less restrictive alternative, also known as an LRA. I will do my best to not throw all of the acronyms around as I chat with you today, so I apologize in advance, there are a lot. So these residents, again, have been granted a conditional release to a less restrictive alternative, also known as an LRA, by the Special Commitment Center and by the court. Today, I want to share some information with you regarding that LRA program, and then I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. You have also received a copy of the brief that I prepared for you, and this has a bit more specific information contained within it. So just for context, the Special Commitment Center is a total confinement facility located on McNeil Island off the coast of Stellicum, Washington, so about 45 minutes from here. It's owned and operated by the Department of Social and Health Services, and the Special Commitment Center provides specialized mental health treatment to individuals who have been found by the court to be a sexually violent predator, or also known as an SVP. When someone is in prison with the Department of Corrections towards the end of their prison sentence, the county prosecutor can petition for an indefinite civil commitment on the grounds that the person is a sexually violent predator. The definition of an SVP is in statute, but in short, it does require that the person has been convicted of a sexually violent crime and has a mental abnormality or personality disorder that makes them more likely to reoffend sexually if they are not in total confinement. When the prosecutor petitions for that, there may be an evidentiary trial, and if the person is found to be an SVP, they will be released to the custody of DSHS when they release from Department of Corrections. So there's not time in between. They release from incarceration with the Department of Corrections and go straight to the care of DSHS. When they arrive at the Special Commitment Center, they will go through a forensic evaluation, and at that time, the Special Commitment Center team will create a pretty robust treatment plan for that person that is individualized to their specific needs. It's important to note that the people on the island are not considered incarcerated, so they have already served their prison term, but they are committed indefinitely. Annually, each resident at the Special Commitment Center does receive an evaluation, and at that time, the forensic team can review their progress in treatment as well as their mental health conditions. And in some cases, the person's condition may have improved to a point where the Special Commitment Center will support them petitioning the court for a conditional release to that less restrictive alternative. So that's kind of the group of people that we're talking about today. Is during their annual evaluation, they have been found to have made improvements in treatment or with their mental abnormality that put them in a position to be able to release back into the community conditionally. If there's clear evidence that treatment has brought about positive mental change, or the person has undergone permanent physiological change that prevents them from committing another violent sexual act, a trial will then be ordered and the LRA would be considered. So just to kind of clarify, the LRA is a placement that is less restrictive than total confinement on the island, but it still offers oversight of the person, and they are still ordered by the court to engage in sex offender treatment when they are out on that LRA. So before the court can order that conditional release to an LRA, the person does have to have a certified sex offender treatment provider lined up. Certified sex offender treatment providers require a special license from the Department of Health, and it's a pretty rigorous process to get that license. The other thing to note is that not every certified sex offender treatment provider will treat this specific population of people. So, each county may have 5 or 6 providers, but not all of them will treat SVPs in the community. So I just want to make sure that's noted. These treatment providers have also agreed to treat the person in the community, and they have provided a specific treatment plan to the court. And they also agree to report violations to the court immediately, as well as provide ongoing updates to the court while the person is on an LRA. In addition to having a treatment provider lined up, DSHS must have also identified housing already. So this is actually pretty recent. Prior to legislation that passed in 2021, the individual's defense attorney found housing for them. But with this new legislation that passed, it's actually DSHS that is responsible for finding the housing. So before this comes before the court, they have to have that housing identified that adheres to distance restrictions. For example, there are pretty standard distance restrictions, from schools, K through 12, as well as daycares and parks, things like that. Once that housing is identified, that provider also must have already agreed to accept the person and be willing to notify the court if the person leaves without permission. So once you have those key pieces in place, you can bring that LRA before the court. With the passage of new legislation in 2021, DSHS is now contracting with providers such as Supreme Living for these housing options. These housing options often contain 24/7 monitoring and chaperoning of individuals when they leave the housing option. I also want to note that in some cases, we may have placements that aren't from the county of commitment. So say Thurston County were to receive someone who was originally committed out of King County. If that were to happen, DSHS is responsible for identifying why they are being placed in a county different than that which committed them. And this may happen based on concerns from the victim or different things going on with the services the person needs. There's some moving parts there, but when DSHS presents the housing option to the court, they have to detail why it may not be that person's county of commitment. The other information that DSHS has to provide when discussing the housing placement option is whether or not they made the effort to adhere to the fair share principles of release. And this is another newer piece of legislation that we're now starting to see. And the fair share principles of release effectively require each county to have adequate housing options for conditional releases in a number equivalent to the number of residents confined at the SCC. So for example, Thurston County currently has 9 individuals committed at the Special Commitment Center. Per the fair share principles of release, that means the county has to be prepared to house effectively 9 individuals on a conditional release. So when DSHS again presents that housing option to the court, they have to say whether or not they were able to adhere to the fair share principles of release, and if not, why that is. Once those are identified, there's a few other things that have to be provided to the court as well, and you can read more about those in the brief that I provided you. But once those are presented to the court will order the Department of Corrections to investigate that LRA proposal. DOC then has 60 days to complete that investigation, and at that time they will often go out and visit the housing facility to make sure that it adheres to the requirements set forth by statute. They may also speak with the treatment provider, family members, and at that time they will also recommend individualized conditions of release to the court. So they will say, based on this person's specific needs, where they will be living, these are additional conditions that we recommend you implement for when this person is in the community. Once all of that is brought back to the court then has the option to proceed and rule that the person may be released to a conditional, less restrictive alternative. Once that ruling is made, Notification must be provided to local law enforcement in the county of release. So for Thurston County, of course, it would be the Thurston County Sheriff's Office that has provided that notification. In addition to local law enforcement, Washington State Patrol is also notified, and those entities have to be given at least 30 days notice, which is important to note. So they're given at least 30 days notice of that person releasing, and at that time, law enforcement can use the model policy provided by the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs to provide additional notification to the community in which that person will be residing. Now, once that 30 days has passed and the person has released into the community, they must continue to meet their conditions of release. If they are to violate their conditions at any time, they may have their less restrictive alternative revoked, and at that time they may face another trial. They may go back to jail. They can also be returned to total confinement depending on the conditions of what that violation were. But at any given time, that can be revoked by the court and by local law enforcement. That was a lot of information, so I apologize for moving so quickly. But again, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Are you kind of trying to justify for this stupidity, or are you advocating the stupidity? What are you trying to do here?
I'm
Are
trying
you just
to
educating us about the facts that we're stuck with?
I'm just
Okay, the county manager answered for you. I guess my concern is, where does the Growth Management Act fit in here? The Growth Management Act, they're trying to consolidate the population into the urban core and prohibit living in rural America. That's the bottom line. And now we've got an arm of the state that is willing to put these deviants out in the unincorporated area where they have less chance of success, no ability for treatment, transportation, or jobs or anything. I don't get it. Could you give me just a rough why maybe that is?
Yeah, I absolutely understand your concerns. And I will say I'm not very familiar with the Growth Management Act, so I apologize in advance. I know that there are specific requirements that DSHS has to adhere to when working to find these housing options. One of the things that I know is happening with this facility is they will be chaperoning. So when someone is to leave the facility, they would be chaperoned, which then would provide transportation. And something else that DSHS does consider when working with contracted housing providers is the radius around them and the services that are available. So I know that in statute, DSHS does actually have to consider whether there are banks, grocery stores, and additional services such as DSHS offices for benefits nearby. So those things are considered. And I think, unfortunately, that's the only information I can provide you is what I know about the LRA program itself. I unfortunately don't have much information on the specifics of why this location was selected.
Okay, I just, then as a closing statement, from my perspective, I was a lawman for almost 40 years. I can honestly tell you, I've never known a rehabilitated sex offender. They all get much more intelligent in their craft, but none of them quit doing their deviant behavior. So I'm just going to close with that for now.
Commissioner Munzer.
A comment and a question. One of the things that happens is, to Commissioner Edwards' point, is when you have these, because this principle applies in a lot of legal contexts, when you have like, can't be within a mile of a school or a park or a bus stop or whatever, it basically knocks out the whole urban area because of the density everywhere is it's like the drug offenses are enhanced, for example, when they're committed within a certain number of 2,500 feet of a school, a park, a bus stop. Well, when you map that out over Thurston County, that's all of Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey. So that same principle applied here would make it so that they're probably looking for, I don't know what the map looks like, and Leah didn't say exactly what the buffers are, but if they're substantial buffers and they include schools, parks, and bus stops, which is what drug laws do, you're almost stuck putting them out in rural areas. So, and I agree with you, that's not necessarily good policy, but that's a different question. My question for Leah is, what I'm confused about after reading your memo is, I get the fair share principle, and I think it makes sense. I can support that, you know. Otherwise, you don't want the state concentrating, you know, a population in one place, putting a burden on those neighborhoods and communities to the extent that it's a burden or a perceived burden. We've got 9, you say, so we should have adequate housing for 9 back. I get that, but where does that, like, Thurston County, the commissioners have never been asked to provide 9 locations. We just have a private outfit that's going and choosing a place. So there's a disconnect to me between who's, like, when you say the county's responsible, who is responsible? The commissioners? Because I think we could get together and pick the 9 best places we think it ought to be versus letting a private company just decide for us. And how do they get the authority to just go out and cite these folks to meet our fair share principle of 9? So how does that play out? And where could the commissioners weigh in on it? Because I think there is there's a healthy, robust debate to be had about what's the best location. Closer to services and lots of people and schools and parks, or chaperone 24/7 in a more remote area where, you know, I don't know, there's obviously a lot, no one's ever gonna be super happy about it, but there's obviously a situation to be managed here. So I don't know if my question makes sense.
It does, Commissioner. Thank you. I appreciate the question. It is something that, as I was doing this research, with the more recent legislation, this is kind of a newer piece. Again, as I mentioned, prior to that 2021 legislation passing, it was actually the defense attorney that went out for each individual person to find housing. And so now we're seeing this shift where it's the responsibility of DSHS to find that housing. And that's why we're seeing a facility like this pop up, is DSHS now has that responsibility. And so a housing facility versus each individual person, I think, is a bit more feasible. But I think they're probably still trying to work out the kinks here. And one of those kinks is, unfortunately, they failed to involve all of the stakeholders in their process, right? Which is what we're seeing now. We have our local county government, like, where is this coming from, per se? And so I think that is an area that can be improved upon, is the way that they work with county governments when they start to do this process. I would say that an option for us might be to, as we move forward, work with the Special Commitment Center directly and let them know that we want to be involved in that process in the future. There are secure community transfer facilities that they have 3 of, I believe now. It's actually required in statute that they work with the local county governments. But a facility like this, it's not. So I would say that that's a possibility for us, is reaching out to them and saying we want to be involved if this process were to happen again in the future, because we think that there's a lot of information and insight that can be offered here. So hopefully that answers your question. Probably wasn't very clear, but I do think there's room for improvement in this process.
It does in part. So clearly the county has had no participation in this decision. Mm-hmm. But between the state and the private entity, I guess I'm still trying to figure out, does DSHS put out an RFP and say, and then Supreme Living goes and buys this piece of property near Tenino and submits that? Or did DSHS, they have a contract with Supreme Living and they say, go out and find places and let us, like who's making, like, if you know, maybe you don't know, but who's actually made, like, if we take this example, we've got a fairly rural site, Thurston County near Tenino. Who actually picked that site? Did the state pick it and hired Supreme Living to manage it? Or did Supreme Living go out and purchase property speculating that they could use these and then they come back and propose this to the state? Where did this piece of property get involved in this whole thing?
Yes. So I think there's kind of 2 pieces to the question. The first one is that I know that this was an RFP process with the Special Commitment Center and DSHS. So it was an RFP process. As for the site, that was ultimately selected by Supreme Living.
As a consultant?
Yes. Yes.
Do you have a follow-up to that? Or, go ahead.
I think it's just to emphasize, Leah's presentation is just informational. She's not advocating for any particular location or any Supreme Living. As you know, Supreme Living is going through a permit process, and you ask a very good question. what is the options the board has? And it becomes a little more complicated when it's a permit involved within this whole process. Right now, we send letters of no compliance because they do need a special use permit. They haven't secured that. We're working with them as we work with any other.
I hope it takes about 5 years like it does a lot of citizens when they want to build a house.
So my point is, and to answer your question and your concerns, it becomes difficult because when there's a permit involved within the process, that permit can be appealed, and you know the consequences of that appeal process for you. So it becomes complicated. I do believe there is an opportunity to engage directly to the state on the program as to how not just the county, Thurston County, but any other local jurisdictions can be involved in this, in the siting of these facilities. Because it seems to be odd, the state issues an RFP, they select a consultant, and the consultant just put a pin on the map and said, here's where we meet all the criteria related to the setbacks and everything else, and go ahead and purchase this property and plans to implement. In this case, you know, thank you for the citizens, because they brought this to our attention, and that's how we embark on this compliance issue. So it's more of a comment, the questions, Madam Chair,
So I'm very familiar with less restrictive alternatives. Back in 2018, the law changed where before, for this, it was a long process for individuals requesting this. 2018, the law changed where the process was way more straight through. And so basically it was the defense attorney who could just request that from the court. It wasn't, it didn't have to be a trial anymore. And so I went through several people who applied for less restrictive alternatives, and these individuals don't last, you know, over a week. And before they're committing, I would get all the emails on every time they would, you know, have an offense written against them in these housing establishments. And it wasn't, you know, long before they were getting sent back to McNeil Island. So I have, just with that experience, I have a lot of concerns and frustrations that come along with trying to set up an establishment here. I understand that, you know, we have to have apparently 9 spaces available, just, you know, in case those 9 individuals decide to go through that process. But, you know, I understand what Commissioner Menser is saying. Like, we didn't know this. This wasn't a request to the board. And so for us, you know, one, how do we get involved into that process? If that's something that the county has to provide, how do we make sure that we are involved in that process? 2, in terms of this, I understand there's an ongoing permit going on, and there's been a lot of citizen concerns. And so what can the board do? And I know that's the question that's been asked in a general sense. What can the board do, especially with a pending permit happening? And I mean, is there a possibility that we can write a letter to the state and ask them that, you know, request a meeting or something where we're asking kind of like, how did this work? Why are we involved in the process? And how can we get involved in the process in the future? Just because again, from personal experience or previous professional experience, I have a lot of concerns about this whole process.
Leah, do we know how many folks are on these LRA alternative currently in Thurston County? Is that information available?
That's not something I know off the top of my head, but I would be happy to find out and get that information back to you.
So it's Snohomish Defense Councils that handle all of these matters across the state. So that would probably be the easiest way, Leah, to find out. They have the contract with the state to handle these matters. Commissioner Edwards.
Leah, are these folks required to register with the sheriff under the sex offender registration program in the state of Washington?
Yes, Commissioner. So when they release, they are required to register.
No, not when they release. When they get placed in one of these locations, are they required to register?
Yes. So when they release from the SCC and are placed at the LRA, they do register under the Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act.
I really think, I mean, my whole goal is to protect citizens of Thurston County. I don't give a damn about these offenders. That's my bottom line. I've never known one to get rehabilitated. And I think we are obligated to protect our citizens. And in that, I think we could think about taking maybe legal action about unfunded mandates. They got 9 knotheads they're gonna put here. They ought to hire 9 deputy sheriffs to work around the clock right there close by. And I think that juries would go with us on some of that stuff. And I think it's about time we quit allowing the state bureaucrats to just get their way. I know the legislature came up with some recommendations here, but it follows staff recommendations, and they all live behind locked gates and safe communities. They're not the ones out there with kids that are gonna be victims. So I think whatever we can do, we ought to do to prevent this type of thing.
Maybe I can, I will work with Leah to see if we can reach out to the state, if we can have a briefing with the board, with some state representatives to understand a little bit better how those facilities are sited. And that would give a good opportunity for the board to have a conversation with the state representative if that is the case. So let's work on that, Leah, and also I will provide you with an update in terms of the permitting process that this facility is going through, and see where we are.
You know, on that permitting process, I would like to see them get in the same line that citizens get in when they come in with a proposal that's gonna need to go in front of the hearings examiner. And it could be 2 or 3 years if they get in that line. Don't give them exceptional treatment. Make them stand in line like everybody else has to stand in line and tolerate the bureaucracy.
I am not advocating that I will be put them in front of the line, Commissioner.
Thank you.
That is not the point that I'm trying to make. They're going through a permitting process, and the normal process that any citizen will go through it. So, and I will keep you posted as to how the process moves forward.
Okay.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Leah. So moving on to item number 2 on our commissioners, item 2022 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, JAG.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a proposed grant. And Tara Solana?
Yes.
Yeah, is patiently waiting here. I will ask her to comment
Come on.
and be in front of it. So this is a proposed grant, it's a JAG grant. The prosecutor's attorney is planning to request. In general terms, the focus of this particular grant is to study to determine the appropriate number of assigned cases to criminal prosecutors in the state of Washington. Defense lawyers have standards in place regarding appropriate caseloads, but no such standards exist in prosecutors. So this attempts to go through that study. Is a $25,000 grant, and the performance of this grant is from October 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2025. That's just about 48 months of performance. It's not significant in terms of the value and everything else. However, there is a couple of steps that we need to take before we can submit a grant. And those steps as to how the legislative authority needs to get involved before we can actually formally submit a grant application, which includes a certification and assurance form that needs to be signed. And it is a clock that needs to start today in order to meet that deadlines. So before I get too much into the details and I give you erroneous information, I will leave that to the expert to walk you through the process.
Okay, and one point of clarification is the deadline for submitting the grant was August 11th. So I have submitted it with a clarification, which was part of your packet. Just clarifying that we are still working on the requirements that you're discussing here. And once those are completed and you guys are able to sign that, we'll submit that form to release the funds. So just wanted to clarify that. Do you want me to just give a brief synopsis or?
Sure.
Okay. So the prosecutor's office, as you know, is working through.
Tara, could you introduce yourself just for the?
Yes, first time here, so yes. My name is Tara Tsiplana. I am the Community Engagement Specialist at the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And I'm here today to discuss this JAG opportunity, grant opportunity. So as you're aware, we have a backlog that was increased significantly through the COVID pandemic. We currently have just over 4,500 open cases and just over 2,400 cases pending review. So we've been, aware that we need additional staff to address this backlog and, projected referrals that will continue coming in. But in order to make an informed request to this group, we would like to conduct this study to really understand what our needs are very specifically. So as you see in your case, we've broken it down by case, or not really case type, but by our teams, which are essentially case types. So there's misdemeanor, general felony, special victims, DV felony, DV misdemeanor, and juvenile. So there are two methods which we've proposed using, and we basically just need to see which one is most feasible given the intern that we would hope to hire on a temporary basis. But it involves determining the first method, which was established about 20 years ago, is the leading, probably best practice process. But it involves the attorneys tracking their time very specifically on certain tasks and certain case types. So that helps establish sort of a baseline. And then the number of hours for that case type is divided by just how much detail I need to go in here, is divided by the number of dispositions that occurred during that time frame, and that gives you the case weight. And then the other part of the equation is what's called actual hours. So it takes the 2,080 hours that are included in a full-time annual work and subtract all the leave, all the sick days, all that sort of stuff, and come up with the solid number of hours that any prosecutor would, getting close as possible to 40 hours and not, more 60, 70-hour work weeks. But anyway, so how many attorneys we would need for each case type. So it's not even just a blank request of, we need 3 FTEs, but we need 1 FTE for misdemeanor. We can get really specific with our request. So that's one method. And then the other one is called a Delphi study, and that involves both qualitative and quantitative data collection. So there's quantitative in the form of surveys that are intended to help gauge the time that attorneys spend on certain tasks. And then there's focus groups that is the qualitative section. So that's focus groups that help identify, what's not getting done, what are some potential workarounds that you can think of that help improve the flow. And so anyway, those are the two options, but unfortunately, the way this grant has come along in development, some of this has been done even after submission. So I had a chance to talk to Dr. Karen Martin from the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance at UW, and she mentioned that she's familiar with this. She offered to help continue guiding and informing the process, and actually even mentioned she probably has some students who'd be interested in a project like this. But her suggestion was to kind of meld the two. So you have, the Delphi study is not as good at really clarifying the amount of time it takes to process a case because people are guessing instead of tracking their time. So her suggestion was to potentially even change a little bit of what's proposed here. So instead of hiring 1 intern to do the data analysis, to hire 2 interns. So we'd have one who's working on the technology piece and creating a timesheet, a template that's
very automated and very simple for attorneys to track their time. Because the whole thing is we know that they're overburdened, and so we don't want to add another task that's going to be creating an issue that makes them further behind. So idea was to create this intern position, to create a timesheet that's easy for attorneys to track their time, and then a second data analysis intern to work all the numbers, code the transcriptions if we go the method of focus groups. But anyway, so we have this money, it's allotted to the county, and so we just thought this was a really great way of ensuring that our future request to this group is well informed through this process.
Can you walk us through the process for the certifications and assurances that we need to go through?
Yes. Okay, so I might need some backup from Robin. She was very helpful in helping me, and Stacy Wyman, in helping me figure out this process. But one thing is bringing it before you all today and making it available for public comment, the full application. We're also going to work with Brian Dominique to put a public notice in the Olympian. And I feel like there's one more piece, Robin. Am I missing something? Do you remember?
So there are quite a few requirements that go with this particular federal grant, and you'll see the packet of certifications. One of the requirements is that the board receive the full application at least 30 days prior to the county receiving the money. So we're supposed to technically do this before the application is made, but given the very short turnaround time provided by the feds for this grant, they did put a provision in the rules that allow us to do the application, which the prosecutor's office has done, and then we wouldn't receive the money until all the requirements are done. So the board has to receive the full application, there has to be public notice, there needs to be an opportunity for the public to comment. We have to say that we have appropriate accounting rules, that we're following all of the normal federal requirements that go along with any federal grant, as outlined in 2 CFR 200. I mean, there's a whole list of things that we have to certify. There has to be a EEOP in place. So we are ensuring that all of those are met. And as Romero mentioned, the clock starts today with your receipt. So 31 days from now, if we're able to ensure that we meet all of the requirements, I can sign on your behalf, and the county can get the money if the application is successful. Because it is competitive at the end of the day. And how much is the grant?
Well, this one is an allocation grant, so it's $25,261.
It's not much money, but it's good money anyways for us to move forward.
And Tara, so if this is an allocation grant, the county is going to receive it no matter what?
That's my understanding. We just have to submit, we wouldn't unless we applied, of course, but
the key is signing the certification of assurance that if we have made all the.
We do have to do that, but I guess my next question is, is this allocation directly to county prosecutors, or could it be used in other ways in the county?
it's to the county is Thurston County, so I
To Thurston County. And what group met to determine that this would be the best use of the funds?
That's a great question. I emailed Thurston County Sheriff's Office. I was under the impression they were the only other recipients that were able to take this money, but I could be wrong about that. This is my first DOJ grant submission in this role, so as you've seen, I've been in a learning curve, so it's possible that there are other entities or agencies within the
The sheriff's office is also applying for another DOJ grant.
They are going for the JAG grant that comes to the state through the Department of Commerce. So their application
that's
is
a process they're
already
going through.
underway.
And these EEOPs are something we've gotten past that we
The
didn't have before.
EOP, remember last year, it was a little bit of an issue. We couldn't attest to the fact that we have an EOP. That's an Equal Employment Opportunity Plan. And we just couldn't attest to the fact, certify that we have one, because we didn't. So fast forward, we do have one. It's not fully completed, but it meets the requirements, I believe, for the prosecutor attorney's office, for the sheriff's office, and the public defense. Those are the three offices and departments who are utilizing the Department of Justice grant, JAG grants. So we're able to check that we have developed an EOP.
And then last question for me, like, I get that it's important that we certify that we're gonna follow rules and everything, but for such a small amount of money, like, why is there this extra thing that the board has to see the complete application, 30-day, like, what is it that's going on here that makes this one so, I've never seen a requirement like that before.
I have seen requirements like that. They are rare, and in my experience, most of those types of requirements go to the state of Washington, with the big grants that go to the state, not the small ones that come to the county. But it is not unusual for the OJP to have a heavy lift on these kinds of things.
So you have the application before you, and barring any questions, we'll continue with the process.
There was a small thing in our packet, and then Robin handed me a bigger
Here's the
thing.
formal, this is the
What?
synopsis,
Okay.
and this is the
Well,
full
Was
application.
but the rules require, I checked through Stacy Wyman, the county's grant manager, what are all the requirements, and is giving you this sufficient? She said, no, you had to have the whole thing,
Okay.
There you go.
so you do.
There you go.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, I just want to do it all right.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, appreciate the time.
Okay, with that, we're moving on to the Cedar Easement Conservation Features Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request from the Chehalis River Basin Land Trust for the board to consider an extension of the Conservation Features Grant they received. The Conservation Features Grant they received lapses on September 30, 2022, and they would like to ask the board to extend that for another 6 months. That would be the end of March 31st, 2023. As a matter of context, the Chehalis River Basin Land Trust received $28,000 of Conservation Features Grant in 2021. When the board awarded the contract, it had a September 30, 2022 deadline. And at this point, they have gone through the process of, they have seen some delays in terms of the appraisal, the title report, and in any, property transaction, as you know, there's always delays that perhaps outside of the purview of the, in this case, the land trust. This is a 20-acre conservation easement. It is located by Baker Creek and the Maima Creek tributaries. And Andre DePaul is here to add additional perspective and answer any questions the board may have. And again, it's a request from the Chehalis River Basin Land Trust to extend the grant performance from September 30, 2022 to March 31st, 2022. Again, the Conservation Features Grant is $28,000.
Is this a good deal, Andrew? Have you given it a thumbs up?
I would think so, and the board did so as well last year when you all awarded the funding.
That's my only question, thank you.
The email in the packet explains it very well, and I'm very satisfied, so I don't have any problem with that.
Okay, I think it's just where we are right now, supply and demand and COVID. So thumbs up, commissioners? You have 3 thumbs up on that?
Thank you. And we'll prepare a letter to attest to the fact of the extension. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Next is the Washington Center for Performance Arts.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. On July 14, 2022, you received a letter from the center, the Washington Center for Performing Arts. That is located in downtown Olympia. I'm going to consolidate this request. The Washington Center has launched a two-phase approach to revamp and remodel the current facility. This particular remodel, the two-phase approach, has a total cost of $8.8 million. So phase one, I believe, has already been completed for a total cost of $3.5 million. Some of the activities included in the phase one of the remodel. It includes the stage ringing, I don't know what that means, the sound system replacement, the complete theatrical lighting replacement, also upgrade of the HVAC and technology updates. Phase two, they have not completed, and that phase two has a total cost of $5.3 million out of the 8.8 total cost. And they expected to do with the $5.3 million, improve the 1,000 new theater seats, include a 40,000 square feet of new carpet on their facility, main theater floor resurfacing, interior design, new painting fixture, and concessional remodel. This particular letter requests the board to consider supporting the phase two of this remodel for $100,000, and that is the gist of the letter.
Can I add, because I went and saw them this Friday, so kind of just to give my overview on it. They invited me over to see kind of what they're doing, and their estimated end date is October. They have a full schedule because they had to cram everything from October down to November, so they have a full schedule in November and December as well. So that's when they expect it to go back to kind of their regular season. They're $350,000 short is kind of what they're fundraising, and that's why they're hoping Thurston County will cooperate with $100,000. All of the other local jurisdictions have already collaborated to this cause. The rest of it has been either through sponsorships or personal donations. So, you know, it was just great to see everything, how they're revamping the place, and how they're trying to just not make it more modern, but try to make sure that everyone who passes through it, that's why they did the whole stage rigging and the sound system, just because they needed to update that for all the local artists that came through there. I think this would be a well-worthy cause. I wasn't sure. I told them, I was like, this will probably be a conversation during the budget amendments. I was surprised to see it right now.
No, I just want to be respectful of the letter.
Yeah.
Have a conversation and I guess I don't think you need to make a decision on this. My suggestion is exactly what you stated, that this should be part of your regular budget conversation. But I want to make sure that I'm respectful to the request.
And so that was, you know, I was like, probably, you know, a request like this would have, I was just how our budget is set up, it would have to be during the budget conversation that, you know, they'll probably take place, because I was like, I'm not sure if there's other funds also that we could use, something like that's all things that we have to look into, and they seemed okay with that. So just wanted to give that overview to my two seatmates. If there are any questions. Commissioner Edwards.
I guess my concern is that the city of Olympia continues to mismanage the whole homeless problem and encourage people to come here from all over the United States. And I would like to see them get a handle on that before we pump money into something that could be a benefit to the community, but the community at large is not thrilled about going downtown. So that is my concern, that if they would come up even with an ordinance or something, like a cleanup ordinance or something for, I don't know, 3-4 blocks around the center that people aren't allowed to sleep in the doorways and poop in the doorways and different things like that. We're on track to have 100 overdoses so far this year, and I don't think citizens want to bring their families to an event and have to step over a dead body. And that's what it's coming to if we don't get a handle on this fentanyl overload that we're faced with. And we're not going to get a handle on it until the city of Olympia takes a hard stand. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I realize you're not asking for a vote, but I would be inclined to support it if I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. So that's where I'm at.
Commissioner Menzer?
I also visited a few months back, and I've been to a half dozen events here the last year, didn't step over any bodies. City of Olympia is cleaning 3 homeless camps this first week September, so I think everyone's hard at work. It looks like from the letter that the City of Olympia contributed 3.9 million and the state 2 million. So we're being asked for a fraction. Yeah, my son's performed piano there, my daughter's danced there. I've seen world-class bluegrass performances there. I think it's an asset to the community, and it'd be something to consider if we can find the appropriate funding source to help out. I did have a question about the owner of this facility is a nonprofit organization, is that what I'm to understand?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, that's what I thought I remembered, but it's not super clear from the letter. So anyway, something to think about. Yeah.
So if you are concerned, I will bring this item for discussion during the budget process.
So just a question, do you want it to be as part of the budget amendment for this year or the midterm for next year?
My suggestion will be for the midterm next year.
To pay it next year,
Yeah.
if they're gonna be done with it by October?
No, I don't think they, I
The
think their
construction's
season.
gonna be done, yeah, but they have a loan is what cause I asked that question where I was like, our budget, I was like, we would have to have conversations in October, if not, it would be in December. So when I was like, if this is if you're gonna be done, aren't we a little bit late to the ball here? And what they said is, no, they had taken out just to cover, basically the full cost. They had taken out a loan that they were paying back. And so, whenever we could get, if we could get those funds, they would be.
That would probably limit us to general fund.
Probably. And I think that's the conversation that you have during budget process, just to look all the general fund, if that is the direction the board wants to have. So,
All right, I'll put it in the midterm.
Yeah, because I really don't.
What's the difference between the midterm and the timing?
Not a lot of timing, because the next amendment you won't approve until December. And the midterm, we could either pay them in December or we could pay them in January. So not a lot of difference between the two for timing,
Just about
but
2-week delay.
yeah, well,
Difference.
yeah.
And I think my suggestion is for you to consider this request when you see the overall general fund discussion.
So with that, can we send them just a letter just explaining our budget process and when this would be under consideration? Just so they are aware of that
I'll send it.
timeline. Okay, commissioner items. Commissioner Edwards, do you have any?
6 minutes.
How about where we at on our REIT financial plan that we were gonna get? Where's that? Where we're at on funding and where it's gonna go and how much?
Giving you that plan, Commissioner, do you want a copy, another copy?
Yeah, maybe. And we couldn't use REIT for anything here like what we're talking about for the Performing Arts Center?
No,
No,
ARPA, is that what we're talking
No
about?
ARPA, how about ARPA?
Well, that's why I asked about timing. The fact that the work is going to be completed would make it difficult under ARPA to show they would have to be found to have been harmed by the pandemic.
Which they were.
And then the,
But no, the project itself was
yeah, but the
envisioned prior
project,
to.
so it's an infrastructure project, and then it comes with all kinds of additional work you have to do under ARPA. It would be quite difficult, if possible at all, to get it approved under ARPA. With the work being done, and they've shown how much money they've gathered for this particular project, hard to relate it to COVID. So there's that, and then I was thinking maybe the other sources, but REIT is not feasible for this.
Commissioner, would you like the read one or read two?
I was wondering if those were combined or separated out, because I thought the finance is going, the income going in is relatively the same on both,
Yeah, it's
right?
a separate
It's
fund,
exactly
so.
the
But
same,
separate
but it
funds.
So
is
you
two
like a
separate
report of
funds.
both?
Yeah, please.
Well, one of them was we have to own the thing. Remember when we were talking about the trail and the brewery park, and it was like,
You have to own the ground.
that one couldn't work because you have to own the asset, even though it talks about parks and recreation trail. And we thought maybe that would be a viable source for the brewery center,
Right,
visitor center
that's
contribution.
REIT two.
Yeah, REIT two, and so that would be the same thing here. We couldn't use REIT two because we don't own this asset.
So we don't own it, we don't operate it, we're not using it for county purposes.
Right.
Those are all the reasons that we could not use REIT.
Couldn't say for
That's true.
economic development,
No, REIT is not for economic development
it brings
purposes.
people in.
So I did take a look at your stadium fund, but that would have to go through the LTAC.
Has a little capacity, no?
It
Because
does
the-
have a little capacity, but it would have to be approved by the LTAC.
Which stands, put us
and then
into next year.
The fourth fund that I thought about, just in the 5 minutes that we talked about it, the 4 different funds I considered, was the Historic Preservation Fund, but 100,000 would completely wipe it out. There's
No,
just not
there's
capacity there.
Okay.
Or maybe a combination of funds you may consider during your budget deliberations.
Okay.
So we'll make sure this, bring this item, and I will send an email stating this conversation.
Thank you.
You want me to keep going, or do you?
Oh, I just had one, and it was, we were talking about it before, it was the opioid settlement that Robin and I think Commissioner Mejia was there, I don't know if you were there, Commissioner Edwards, but WASAC had a presentation from the Attorney General's office and impressing upon us at least a dozen times that we need to sign those documents by the 23rd of September, and I just wanted to make sure everybody heard that and there was no concerns about it. You know, it's gonna, Robin calculated it's gonna end up being about $250,000 a year for 17 years in order to apply toward opioid. That could help us with some of the things the coroner's described and the sheriff's office has described and the, you know, I don't know what all the parameters are. They said the parameters, there were parameters, it has to be connected. We have, of course, we have an opioid response plan that we spent community effort and commitment to develop. There are parameters, but they said they're pretty broad, as long as you're working toward addressing the opioid crisis, and you know that has a lot of elements to it. It's got jail elements, it's got health elements, it's got all sorts of elements that touch the opioid crisis, and they also said we should try to make sure we're not duplicating expenditures of the state, because the state is spending about half of it, and then the county's gonna be spending about half of it, this big fund. It's like 561 million or something. They're carving out a little piece for attorney's fees or whatever, and then but some of those are directly paid by the litigant, by the defendants, and then the rest is kind of being, roughly speaking, half and half to the state, half to the local. We do have to work on a regional basis, in a regional council, and I don't know exactly what our region is. They said there's 9 regions in Washington. the same regions they use for something to do with the
Maybe
voluntary?
the same, like
ASOs.
Mason County, Grace Harbor.
Is it our 5-county like choice network thing?
That might be
Most
the same
likely.
region they're talking about.
Which puts us, I think, with some of the more rural counties.
Right.
Which means we might be, my thought was, you know, since we've already spent a lot of time and effort on the opioid, there was a crisis declaration before I got on the board. There was a task force that put together a plan, and we've revised that plan post-COVID. That task force is still meeting. Maybe that, and they said you could use existing structures
That might be
to
the platform in which we
satisfy.
can invite the other counties to participate.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking, because we've done a lot of work there. Don't want to waste it. So, just as long as everyone's aware of that and we get our documents in, that's all I wanted to bring up.
Should we check with our prosecutor? I mean, I couldn't see any reason not to sign it, but we
need
should
to sign
probably check with the prosecutor.
Yeah, I think we need to sign it, but I think the prosecutor will have to give a compelling reason as to why not. But
If we shouldn't, but I mean, he may be aware, hasn't John been actively involved in these cases?
I think Scott Cushion is the one who's been helping us on the opioid litigation, so I'll follow up.
And that's the total? Over that
our
17 year,
share.
That's ours, that's the total?
Well,
no more counties
from
some
well,
other-
no, that is for the current settlement agreement, there are 2 outstanding
This is only the
suits.
distributor lawsuit. There
Yeah,
are
this
other
is only
lawsuits
one
that's still
piece.
going, so this is just the
I
settlement.
mean, we have a chance of getting more.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is a chance. We also have a chance of getting less. If everyone doesn't sign on, then it won't trigger this payment.
Can you explain what everyone in the county?
Everyone is all of the litigating jurisdictions and 90% of the non-litigating jurisdictions in the state of Washington.
That includes municipalities?
Over
Yes.
10,000.
Yep.
Any city over 10,000.
So we need to make sure that we reach out to the cities.
Right.
And that would be my.
We'll just about eat it up in administrative overhead costs, probably. Jesus. The bureaucrats sure figure out a way to get it.
A lawyer, so the couple of points they made though, is that on this distributor case, only one's gone to trial and it was in West Virginia, but the distributors won. So the idea that we're sitting here with all the leverage in the world and that it's a slam dunk is not actually true. The one case it's gone to jury verdict, the defendants won the case. Secondly, kind of forgot what my second point was, but anyway, it was interesting to know.
The biggest case that's still going through the courts is the manufacturers.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest case they have not been.
Oh, and my only other point was just that the lawyers, you know, this is, I think, the defendant's lawyers saying, you know, they want the certainty that they're not gonna, that this is done. You know, they're gonna pay out, it's a pretty substantial amount, but they want everybody's signature on the dotted line that they're done. And that's their lawyers doing a good job of, you know, putting conditions in there that give them certainty. And that's how.
So then, one thing that they mentioned, which I thought was very interesting, it's like, well, if you don't sign, the attorneys went over it, like, you can't come back later and say, I want in anymore, like it was, I thought that was pretty interesting, and they also mentioned, I'm trying to think, you couldn't come back and, like, if you signed, you couldn't, like, sue them again. That, I think that's what Commissioner Menzer said. So I thought it was a very informational hearing, and thank you, Robin, for kind of crunching out the numbers on an estimate on what they're.
As soon as they told us how to do it, I was looking for the document.
So Robin, is the 250,000,
That's a rough.
roughly, is to the Thurston County jurisdiction or the Thurston County region?
No, that's just Thurston County's share. Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater would also get a much lesser amount.
So there is somewhat of a motivating factor for the local jurisdictions to sign in.
Yeah, I think Olympia was the biggest of the 3, and our percentage was 2.3 with a whole lot of factors, and theirs was 0.6, so they'd get maybe a fourth as much as we would.
Because it's
And then-
population plus some kind of factor about the impact of the crisis on your communities.
Right.
I don't know
So
whether-
we
And then
were-
Lacey and Tumwater were
So
a
the
whole
work
lot less.
that we did supporting this litigation, we went through what you were asking, is making sure that we highlight all the impacts in the cases, it's paying off.
Right. So the total, they kept saying it was split 50-50 between the locals and the state, but it wasn't quite. 215 million shared amongst all the local jurisdictions in the state of Washington. And then about 230 or so retained by the state. And then everybody is 15% less for attorney fees. So it's, you know, it's not millions coming in, but it's 250,000 more than we had to address this issue.
For 17 years.
Yeah, and the first payment would come December 1st of this year, and it would be a double payment. So about 500,000 December 1 of this year in the door.
So we need to create probably a fund just to house that.
We would be wise to create a separate fund, because it is a restricted amount of money. We don't want to lose it in Fund 1500.
That's what we need, another fund. Okay, we don't have commissioners check-in this morning. I will have to leave here soon, but I just want to make sure that there's no other items commissioners need to discuss. You have an item?
More of on the schedule, Chair, tomorrow, Commissioner Mincer and myself gonna be going to Tacoma to attend an invitation related to climate change. And so we will not be able to attend the directors' meeting at lunch, nor the Superior Court update. Would you like to hold those?
I'll be in Tenino. I
Okay,
have
we'll
a
cancel.
speaking event, yeah.
We'll cancel both.
I might be with her.
So we'll cancel
At the
both meetings.
Tenino Chamber.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll cancel.
okay.
There you go, Jane.
Okay, it is 12:06, we are adjourned, thank you.
Thank you.